Welcome to This Week in South Carolina. I'm Gavin Jackson. As the number of cases of COVID-19 continue to rise in South Carolina, so too have the executive orders issued by Governor Henry McMaster. He's closed beaches, parks, lakes, and now he's banned non-essential businesses from operating in the state. And he has stressed that people need to stay home to stop spreading COVID-19. Here's the latest from this week. A new month begins in our new normal, where there are now more than 1,200 cases of COVID-19 spread across nearly every county, and the number of South Carolinians who have succumbed to the disease surpasses 25. Meanwhile, a dire statement from Washington that up to 240,000 Americans could die from the virus.
I want every American to be prepared for the hard days that lie ahead. We're going to go through a very tough 2 weeks. And then hopefully, as the experts are predicting, as I think a lot of us are predicting after having studied it so hard, you're going to start seeing some real light at the end of the tunnel.
Several cities across the state have issued stay-at-home orders, which close non-essential businesses. But on Tuesday, Governor Henry McMaster issued his order that would also require non-essential businesses to close, and he reiterated his previous calls for people to stay home.
At this point, whether it's an order to stay at home, a recommendation to stay at home, a suggestion to stay at home, whether it's written, whether it's oral, if there's anybody out there that does not know that they should stay at home, then we've really been missing something. People should stay at home as much as possible. They're going to need to go to work. There are things that they must do, but other than that, they need to stay at home.
Flatten the curve so medical professionals don't get swamped with cases that are already straining resources. The second shipment from the Strategic National Stockpile was distributed to each of the counties this week. It contained thousands of masks, respirators, face shields, gowns, and additional personal protective equipment. It's unclear how much more will be coming, though. While the medical field is strained, the economy as a whole is lurching further downward. America is now facing record unemployment claims, with more than 10 million out of work. Over the past 2 weeks, more than 100,000 South Carolinians have claimed unemployment insurance benefits. That has fueled high levels of folks visiting local food banks, like Harvest Hope in Columbia, which has seen its highest numbers since the 2015 flood. Some people are driving from more than an hour away to the emergency food bank.
And we're all out of work right now. My son was working for a steel company, and my sister was working in a nursing home, and I was doing Lyft, and we're temporarily. I think it's going to get worse, and I think that we need more places like Harvest Hope to help the people out.
You know, usually we see anywhere from 150 to 200 families a day, and we're topping 400 now. So last week I think we saw like 5,000 people, and I think we'll still see those high numbers this week, even on those 3 days. We're not able to serve people, but it's not what you would get if we were not in a crisis. If you were to come here in a regular April, you would get more food.
All right.
Joining me now to discuss the federal response and his own battle with COVID-19 is Congressman Joe Cunningham. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Gavin. I appreciate it.
So a lot has happened, obviously, but I want to start off talking about you, how you're doing, and your bout with COVID-19.
Well, I feel great. You know, you may know I came out of quarantine yesterday, and I was one of the more fortunate ones. You know, my symptoms were very mild, had a loss of taste and smell. And at the time that it happened, those symptoms weren't really even on people's radar as being an indicator of testing positive. But I came in contact with someone up in D.C., a fellow member who had tested positive, so I went into quarantine. And then after those symptoms occurred, then I got myself tested and found out that I was positive. So it's just strange how this this virus can impact on such a broad spectrum. My colleague, who I presumably got it from up in D.C., he went to the hospital for over a week, and myself, my symptoms are relatively mild. So it just goes to show that there's probably a lot of people walking around right now that do not think that they have it, do not know that they have it, and just think that they've lost their sense of taste or smell through allergies or the pollen or whatever.
So I guess that's what maybe got you the ability to get a test, is that you had come into contact with someone else that had tested positive. How did you get a test to do that?
Well, what we tell folks is if you start having these symptoms and you go to, the CDC's website, you can go to our website, cunningham.house.gov. But if you start having these symptoms, we tell folks the first thing you need to do is contact your doctor, contact your local physician. If you don't have one and you're local here, you can go to musc.care, and they have a website there where they go through your symptoms, and if you check off certain symptoms, then they schedule you for a test at the local drive-through center, which is over here in West Ashley. And so that's exactly what I did, is I put in my symptoms, went through that website, and qualified for a test, went and had the test, and then got the results back that said I was positive. So,
And he did the right thing, quarantining while waiting for those results to come back too. So that was what they recommend. But switching from your experience, I want to talk about the federal response. Obviously, we saw that massive stimulus bill get signed into law, $2.2 trillion. I want to ask you if you think that the federal response has been fast enough, and if that money is getting to South Carolina fast enough as well.
Well, I mean, look, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so I don't think, it can never be fast enough. People need relief yesterday, and but I'm glad to see that, the House, the Senate, the President came together and put that $2 trillion package together to help the small and mid-sized businesses. I talked to a colleague the other day, 2 days ago, and he said that he was on the verge of, he owns retail businesses, and he's on the verge of laying off 80% of those people before that stimulus check came through and the PPP was made available. And so there's a lot of great things in this stimulus package for small to mid-sized businesses that allows, incentivizes businesses to retain their employees and allows access to loans, to grants. So we encourage, every small, mid-sized business who's struggling with this pandemic, they can reach out to our office and we can facilitate that, or their local banks as well.
So really just kind of sending that message to hold on there, see what this relief can do for you, and then obviously possibly some more future relief as well coming down.
Yeah, we hope so, and I think that's where our eye is right now. We're not going to be back up in D.C. at the earliest the week of April 20th, but I'm still working from home. I'm still on the phone with small business owners, constituents. I was making the calls this morning to constituents to check in, make sure everybody's staying safe and healthy. We're trying to, just like everyone else, we're trying to adjust to this new norm of working from home. My family, I have my wife and I at home with our toddler who's a little over 2 years old, and just like many parents we're trying to make that adjustment.
And kind of wrapping up with the federal money, do we know how much money South Carolina itself will receive? It's talked about possibly $1.9 billion. Has that got solidified at any point, or what are you expecting?
Yeah, well, as much as possible, it would be my answer, and then that's what we're working on to get as many resources as possible. Obviously, the stimulus checks will be coming to the individual, so it depends on how you factor it in, depends how you calculate that. But also, I know that the people have already started to apply for these loans and these grants, specifically the PPP that allows folks to retain their employees and incentivizes paying them as opposed to furloughing them or laying them off. But as far as the exact dollar amount, it kind of depends on how you calculate it.
So this week we saw a lot of clashes between municipalities and the state, basically over this whole stay-at-home issue. We saw local municipalities in your areas too, especially passing these ordinances for people to stay at home, only got for essential services. We saw the Attorney General's office issue a non-binding legal opinion saying that the governor has the power to do that. The governor has now issued that order to shut down non-essential businesses. Do you think that's enough where we are right now, or what do you think? Or do you think the municipalities had a little bit more in their ordinances versus what the governor is pushing for at this point?
Well, look, on Monday we called for the governor to issue a stay-at-home order, and for all intents and purposes, that's kind of what he did the other day. And I think it's important to take a step back and commend the governor for making that response. It was a tough call for him to make, but it was the right call as well. So I think you have to give credit where credit's due as to that recent order. And look, like you said, the mayors are put in kind of a tough spot. Their job is to keep their constituents safe. And I'm a fan of home rule. I'm a fan of our local mayors, and I think they do a great job. And I trust these local mayors to do what's best for their constituents. I trust Jimmy Carroll on Isle Palms and Pat O'Neill over on Sullivan's, John Tecklenburg here in Charleston, Mayor McCann down in Hilton Head. And we trust these folks to do what's right for their constituents. And when they issue those stay-at-home orders, and then it's in conflict with a Attorney General opinion, it kind of exposes these mayors to some to some legal action.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think with what the governor's recent order helps alleviate that legal exposure for those local municipalities. So I was pleased to see that happen, and pleased to see us moving in that right direction.
So when we look at that, that's obviously for these non-essential businesses, but there are a multitude of essential businesses that have been deemed essential to remain open. Do you think businesses are doing enough, and do you think that the government maybe needs to do more to get businesses to make sure that they are ensuring the safety of their employees and in some cases their customers?
Yeah, I mean, look, the safety and health comes first, folks, and I think this is a delicate balancing act. Obviously, we have to put more favor towards the safety and health of folks, but we also have to realize the economic repercussions. And this isn't going to be. We talk about the stimulus package that's coming down, and we talk about the payments, the stimulus checks that individuals will be receiving. At the same time, we don't really know how long this is going to be going on, and that's the $1 million question. And if we can't flatten this curve, if we can't get through this as quickly as possible, then that stimulus money, it's like we're setting money on fire just to keep ourselves warm. We have to view both of this, the stimulus money and flattening the curve at the same time. And when we talk about flattening the curve, you're talking about social responsibility, you're talking about people staying in, and you can't just shove all that off onto the federal government or the local government or the state government. Folks have to be responsible themselves. They have to continue to wash their hands, continue to be mindful of exposing other people, congregating in large groups, covering your mouth when you sneeze or cough. I mean, all these things may sound small, but they make a big difference in the aggregate. And so, I know we tend to focus a lot on what the government can do and what the government is doing, but there's also a lot of individual responsibility here that needs to be exercised.
Mm-hmm. And looking forward there for another stimulus possibility, Congressman Jim Clyburn, the majority whip, was on a conference call yesterday with a lot of other leadership. They were talking about phase 4, this, possibly looking at more infrastructure being passed in a next stimulus bill. But something that he spoke about on that call, he said he's gravely concerned that things are going to get a lot worse in rural areas and low-income communities that are especially educationally disconnected and medically underserved. What are your thoughts about rural areas in South Carolina, and and do you think that they're getting enough attention, or do you fear that there could be a big wave coming, a hidden wave coming for those areas in the state?
Yeah, I mean, I was reading in a paper today about as a Clarendon that has been hit significantly harder than most other communities. It's these small rural communities could see the brunt of this eventually in a later phase. But I'm with Congressman Clyburn with his ideas to expand rural broadband. Yeah, I think the entire South Carolina delegation is there as well. So when you talk about infrastructure, rural broadband is a bucket in that whole infrastructure plan. And I was actually talking to a teacher yesterday who's complaining that the fact that the bandwidth is stretched too much, and that kids and teachers can't get online, they can't use certain programs in these rural areas. And we've all heard the stories about parents driving their kids to the McDonald's parking lot to get Wi-Fi so they can turn in their homework. Right now, we've seen a big shift of things from the schools, the businesses, to home and to the internet connection. People using the internet to work and for classes and stuff. So the rural areas have been hurting and have been ignored for quite a bit. So whatever bill and stimulus package that comes next that focuses on infrastructure has to have a rural broadband component to it. So these people who live in these rural areas are brought up to the same level as the folks who live in the more populated areas.
And with just a few seconds left, I want to get a last question in here, sir, about filing. You filed to run again for Congress. You have some Republicans that are running for the nomination to challenge you as well. I'm wondering, do you think that the primary in June needs to be rescheduled, or when do you think that decision might need to be made?
Well, I think it's a good point. I think obviously this has impacted every aspect of our life. But it's going to be a decision that's made by others and not myself. But I would say we haven't been focusing much on the race or politics. We've been focused on. I mean, there's literally folks dying in our state, in our community. There's people stuck in their homes, and we've got a lot of other things on our plate right now. Politics can come later.
Gotcha. Congressman Joe Cunningham, thank you very much for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. And joining me to discuss the state of education in South Carolina is State Superintendent of Education, Molly Spearman. Superintendent Spearman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Gavin, for having me on.
So, just want to get your thoughts on, schools have been closed since March 16th in South Carolina. Walk us through how this situation has evolved and where we are right now.
Well, I think those first few days and even first week, we were very overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all. Overnight, we changed from having our students in school face-to-face. The first priority was to get the cafeterias rolling, and we set up almost 600 feeding sites. We're doing 500,000 meals a week. We've done by tomorrow, probably 1.5 million meals. So that was an extraordinary accomplishment to get that rolling with our cafeteria workers, bus drivers. At the same time, teachers were moving from face-to-face instruction to whatever their best option was. We have about 80% of our districts are able to give their instruction online through one-to-one contact online or some type of using technology, and that seems to be going very, very well. About 20% of our folks had to do pencil and paper, running off copies, sending instruction out, having parents come pick it up. And even the technology folks had to do that. Parents had to come pick up the devices. So it was an extraordinary task. I think everybody was very overwhelmed. But now we're moving into the grateful phase and being optimistic that it seems to be going really well. I had a call yesterday afternoon. There were 4,000 teachers on the town hall meeting. And overwhelmingly, they said that they were pleased with how it was going. They felt like they did have the infrastructure that they needed. That was the response from about 80% of those on the call. The other 20% said, they're concerned and don't feel that they had the technology that they needed. So that's something we're going to have to address. But overall, it's going well. Still a lot of unknowns, but we're settling in.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say? I know you mentioned some of those things and things are settling in, but what have you maybe learned that you haven't expected, or how you implemented this so quickly in a sense? Some things that you guys have learned and taken away from this so far?
Yeah, so far, I think we were very optimistic. There were 15 districts that were already a part of a pilot project on e-learning to cover inclement weather days, like a day or two of snow, maybe a week of snow, and they were in this pilot project. The parameters that were set up for that were that we would give 3.5 hours, 4 hours of instruction daily, and students would be required to do that amount, check in, and then they would be counted as present for the day. Once we got into this, and those are the same parameters we use for all the other districts as they sent us their emergency plans. We required every district to send in a plan to us as how they were going to deliver instruction. We approved those based on similar parameters of that e-technology pilot. I think it was a bit ambitious. Now that we're in it and we're hearing from parents, some of it was just too much to say that a kindergarten child would do 3.5 hours of sit-down work each day. So we're backing off of that somewhat to be more age-appropriate, realizing that lots of learning can take place in the home with the family. It doesn't have to be sit-down pencil and paper work or sitting in front of a device for that amount of time. So we've got a group working right now with our districts for more age-appropriate directions. I think that has been one of the major takeaways. Mm-hmm. And now we're moving into, well, what do we do with the work? How do we grade it? And we gave out guidance on that this week.
Mm-hmm. And just kind of to touch on that, since you brought it up, how does that look? How does that work going forward when we're talking about evaluating, these hundreds of thousands of students who are now, learning remotely and then also have their teachers are now their parents essentially? How does that look for grading?
Yeah, well, it's amazing because some teachers are able to be in contact with their students every day, just like you and I are talking, and it's going extremely well. Mm-hmm. Others have to use the telephone or Facebook, so not as personal as what you and I are doing. Our main priority first is for our seniors to make sure that they are able to graduate on time, get their diploma, get the grade point average that they need to compete for scholarships or whatever their next step may be. So our guidance was that all work of seniors should be turned in and completed by May 15th. It should be graded and stored in our Power School system by May 22nd, and that is going on. Some districts may do it quicker than that, but that is the last date that students should be turning in work. We did decide that the grades should be numerical type grades, and that is because of our significant ability in South Carolina to deliver state scholarships through our lottery scholarships. So we don't want to go away from that. And also a lot of dual credit work that students are doing with the technical college system and with higher ed. So we want students to be able to get credit for that work as best they can. There are some issues now with being able to give credit for those dual credit courses that required a lot of hands-on activity and showing that you know how to do something. Maybe it's mechatronics and running big equipment. So we're still working on how we're going to be able to deliver that credit. But the emphasis was on getting it done so that seniors can graduate. So we sent this guidance out. It pertains very heavily to any credit-bearing course, and that's basically the work that is done in high school. There's some middle school students who take credit work while they're in middle school. As far as first grade, kindergarten through 8th grade on other courses, that lies very heavily on the district policy. Mm-hmm. So we encourage them to use their district policy with good common sense.
Sorry, Superintendent, kind of switching gears from that, we're looking at the calendar right now. Schools are out for April. Neighboring state of Georgia just said that they're going to be out for the rest of the year, the school year that is. Any thoughts on what we might be seeing? Is that going to be happening here in South Carolina?
Well, certainly we're evaluating that. And just a few weeks ago, I would have said, absolutely, we're going to be back in school in May. Things are going to pass. But looking at the situation now, I would say there's a chance that we may not be back. There's no official decision on that, and Governor McMaster and I talk. We want to use good data. We don't want to make the decision before it's absolutely necessary. So we've got another week or two, maybe 3, that we can wait and see how things are going and make that decision. If I were a betting woman right now, it's not looking good, but hopefully things will be under control and we can start back to school. But I promise you that we will take the data that's in and make our decision based on what's right for the children and teachers of South Carolina. And I'm guessing that would be done surely sometime mid-April, if not sooner.
Mm-hmm. And Superintendent, you were talking earlier about how about 20% of students or teachers are using pencils and paper to do their schoolwork like sometimes that they are in the classroom itself. Is that because they have limitations of technology in the areas of the state, or talking about even people with technology? I'm wondering if they've also been experiencing issues with bandwidth, for Wi-Fi, for example.
Sure. Well, a combination of all of that. We have been working very closely with the service providers. They've been very generous in giving free or cheaper internet access to families. We've placed buses around the state. We're still working on that, moving buses around as the need is being assessed so that folks can get on the bus or be beside the bus to get access. So all of those reasons you mentioned are part of it. But there's some areas that even with their technology, they may have started with a certain grade. Usually it's in the high school where they provide devices for high school students and then work down until they have every student covered. And so districts are at different levels with that. So I believe that folks are assessing. I know I've been on the phone this morning with several districts who are realizing they may be a very large district, but may have 15-20% of their kids that they're not able to do instruction online. So they're looking at what that would cost to buy that hard drive, to buy the equipment, to get it up and running. Some of them are considering using their federal stimulus money for that. So I believe as we move through this, we will be in better shape, will be more ready for this in the future. And technology has proved so powerful in delivering instruction that I think we have to make a commitment as a state to correct this and make sure that all of our students, every student, no matter where they live, will have this type of quality instruction in an emergency situation.
This is something you'll definitely be pushing for going forward when it comes to education funding. And just to wrap up really quick, maybe about 30 seconds. I know previously you've mentioned in press conferences before giving some advice to parents. What's your advice right now to parents who, again, are now teachers on the front line helping their children get through this?
My advice is to try and enjoy it. I know it has to be stressful, but look at this as a time for your family to be together and for you to learn and grow together. We're trying to back off of some of the required minutes. We realize that may have been overly anticipated or too high of expectation there. So relax, enjoy this time with your students. It's more important for you to be emotionally happy right now, physically well, emotionally well. The academics will come. That's not the top priority. It is a priority, but enjoy this time with your students and try to just take a deep breath and do the best you can.
Great. Thank you very much, Superintendent Spearman.
My pleasure.
Thanks. To stay up to date on the latest news of COVID-19 in South Carolina, check out the South Carolina Lead podcast. We're dropping regular pods throughout the week to give you the latest information on what's happening in South Carolina. You can find that wherever you find podcasts or on southcarolinapublicradio.org. You can also find the latest news on scetv.org. From South Carolina ETV studios in Columbia, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina.